every religious person who takes the Genesis account of creation, say, seriously, 53% of Americans seemingly take it literally, but just even dignifying it as informative. Any person who's doing this is essentially saying to somebody like Stephen Hawking, Stephen, you're a smart guy. I see you got a lot of equations over there, but you essentially don't know enough about cosmology, because here, God did this in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh, and I don't really, it could be a metaphor, but I don't see you really grappling with the nuances here, and they're essentially saying to someone like Richard Dawkins or Robert Trivers or any evolutionary biologist, they're saying, you're saying all this stuff about DNA and the fossil record and radiocarbon dating, but it says here that man was made in a separate act of creation, and that really we should ponder over that. And the fact that you use words like God and faith with such enthusiasm puts you in you are the shade under which all of these really barbarous forms of religiosity still relax and luxuriate and thrive. And the fact that we can understand the molecular constituents of chocolate doesn't make us not want to eat chocolate. I mean, these are different scales of interaction with the world. And so it's not a matter of only being coldly calculating in our approach to life, but where we have to call a spade is in gratuitous claims to certainty about invisible realities and the moral structure to the universe, about a God who so hates homosexuality that he will whip up tsunamis in defense of chaste heterosexual people. I mean, this is a vision of life that is animating millions and millions of our neighbors, and we have been cowed into not criticizing it. And you missed the point. I wasn't criticizing your scientific credentials. You're an endocrinologist. You're an MD. You're not a theoretical physicist. With questions like, well, who are you to say that not always vomiting is healthy? What if you meet someone who wants to vomit, and he wants to vomit until he dies? Okay, how could you argue that he is not as healthy as you are? In talking about morality and human values, I think we really are talking about mental health and the health of societies. Water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. This seems as value-free an utterance as human beings ever make. What if someone says, well, that's not how I choose to think about water. Okay, I'm a biblical chemist, and I read in Genesis 1 that God created water before he created light. So I take that to mean that there were no stars. So there were no stars to fuse helium and hydrogen into heavier elements like oxygen. Therefore, there was no oxygen to put in the water. So either water has no oxygen, or God created special oxygen to put in the water. But I don't think he would do that, because that would be biblically inelegant. Okay, if someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you provide to show the importance of logic? Let me give you a sense of what it's like to be me having this conversation. I mean, it seems to me we could have been having this conversation 500 years ago. And life was difficult 500 years ago. There was a lot of despair. There were crops failed, and disease spread, and people suffered just instantaneous and catastrophic changes in their fortune. And it was the cause of all of this actually was well understood 500 years ago. It was witchcraft.
He says what you're tending to do with the much, much more is profoundly misleading.
And worse than that, and I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about people, worse than that, it is on a continuum with what the really religiously infatuated and dogmatic are doing, and because you're using the same words,
scientifically dogmatic and infatuated.
But like that move itself is, I mean, so you can say, you can talk about scientific fundamentalism as the corollary of religious fundamentalism. That's just a trick with words. There is no scientific fundamentalism that is analogous to religious fundamentalism. But that's a separate issue.
It's true. Centuries of anti-Semitism pursued by Christians did feed into the hysterical animosity toward the Jews in 20th century Europe.
Let's not tangle. Because
that's not the same thing as saying that, well, it's, you know, it's really
Let me just
religion.
ask you one question then, okay? Let's say we're going to resolve the dispute in the Middle East this way. We're going to offer the Jews, the Israelis, Oregon. You know, we get into our heads, this is going to just solve the conflict. Why won't they accept Oregon as prime a piece of real estate as you want to give them in the heart of the United States? Move over here, no more suicide bombing, give the Holy Land to the Muslims. One, do you think they would accept that? And two, why not?
Well, in the early history of Zionism, they were given a number of such offers, and they rejected them. They rejected them in part for the reasons that you would certainly invoke of irrational religious belief about their right to that piece of land. That would be certainly part of it.
I mean, who are we to say even that they're wrong to beat them with lengths of steel cable or throw battery acid in their faces if they decline the privilege of being smothered in this way? Okay, well, who are we not to say this? Who are we to pretend that we know so little about human well-being that we have to be non-judgmental about a practice like this? I'm not talking about voluntary wearing of a veil. I mean, women should be able to wear whatever they want as far as I'm concerned. But what does voluntary mean in a community where when a girl gets raped, her father's first impulse, rather often, is to murder her out of shame? Just let that fact detonate in your brain for a minute. Your daughter gets raped, and what you want to do is kill her. What are the chances that represents a peak of human flourishing? The desperation you hear from me and the frustration is that we are wasting time. I mean, this conference is purposed toward convincing someone like you that we even have a problem with religion. And I find that just a phantasmagorically strange situation to be in. And that's, you know, I'm sorry to be so strident, but I think this really matters. You know, I mean, which one of us wins this argument? I think the consequences of that really matters. So, what would happen if I showed up at a physics conference and said string theory is bogus? You know, it doesn't resonate with me. It's not how I choose to view the universe at the smallest scale. I'm not a fan. Okay? Well, nothing would happen because I'm not a physicist. I don't understand string theory. I'm the Ted Bundy of string theory. Okay? I just thought I should briefly respond to your comment, Scott, which I found to be remarkably eloquent and really amazingly censorious in this context. I mean, it was delivered as though with the eye of omniscience. There's no one in this room who understands religion. No one is evincing the intellectual or moral character necessary to really launch the criticism that many of us are attempting. We can talk about who the 19 hijackers were and how much economics or their own backstory of oppression played in their behavior. I would say none at all, and I would say the evidence is on my side. And I've looked at your own studies, and I know the kinds of interviews you do with jihadis, and we can talk about that data. But the larger critique here of religion is that religion is functioning by a double standard. The double standard is you should be respecting people's certainties when they are totally uncoupled to evidence, when they are actually vacuous in the way that you just described. We have not passed laws against believing Elvis is still alive. The problem is that whenever somebody seriously represents his belief that Elvis is still alive in a conversation, on a first date, at a lecture, at a job interview, he immediately pays a price. he pays a price in ill-concealed laughter.
Right. Now, surely you can agree with him on that.
That is a good thing. Now, then he could rattle on about this is not a scientific claim, this is a matter of faith. You know, when I look at you, I see you might be Elvis. I mean, he could do this. Also, I just want to say to you, Scott, there's a massive gulf between how you and I think about these issues, particularly the question of Islam. And I don't want my not dealing with that in this talk to signal that I haven't recognized this gulf or that I don't think others should recognize it. I mean, I think your talk, I thought I had a good theory of mind. I don't know what you are doing with yours in your talk on Islam. And you have a style of drawing that message, which is, you know, somewhat confabulatory in my mind. I mean, you have a blizzard of detail, much of which is orthogonal to the question at hand. And, you know, you basically delivered this idea that, you know, soccer and friendship among men is the problem. It explains suicide bombing better than the explicit doctrines of jihadism and martyrdom and Muslim eschatology. And I think it's irresponsible. So Deepak just said some very seems a strange word to use, but some concrete things that science can criticize. Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them, or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil.
People who think you can use the jinns, the devils,
right,
and harness their power for the reactor.
It's almost tempting to fund such a project. Yeah. Your run-of-the-mill serial killer in America, okay, who spent his life raping and torturing children, need only come to God, come to Jesus on death row, and after a final meal of fried chicken, he's going to spend an eternity in heaven after death.
It's called
Okay?
binding.
No, it's not. It's called absolute subjective ignorance of what's actually going on outside your consciousness. And when you look at the books and ask yourself, is there the slightest shred of evidence that this is the product of omniscience? Is there a single sentence in here that could not have been uttered by a person for whom a wheelbarrow would have been, you know, emergent technology? You have to say no. But when someone like myself points out the rather obvious and compelling evidence that God is cruel and unjust because he visits suffering on innocent people of a scope and scale that would embarrass the most ambitious psychopath, okay, we're told that God is mysterious. Happily, we do not assess public opinion by having New York Times journalists go out and live in the Muslim world and make friends and get a vibe. I mean, this is not a single well-run opinion poll would be worth 1,000 years of you wandering around the Middle East.
Well, come on.
No. Okay, how many? That's not
Wrong,
meant to be hyperbolic.
Wrong.
Well, let me tell you. How many?
You can't possibly believe that about polls, Mike.
Well, all we've got are conversations. All we've got are conversations.
Man's lived there for 15 years, for God's sake.
Well, how many people did you ask? How many people did you ask?
I've done it for 2 hours. How long, you know? Go on.
How many people did you ask whether they supported suicide bombing? You know, you could have lived there a long time and asked that question a lot and still not have done anything like the job that Pew did when they went into 9 countries and got a random sample, insofar as that was possible, of Muslims and asked 38,000 people that question. Okay, the responses were appalling. These are areas of genuine scientific uncertainty, but what is obvious is that the way to clarify this domain is not to pretend to know things you don't know.
Well, I'm sorry.
God loves me, don't you know? He cured me of my eczema. He makes me feel so good while singing in church. And just when we had given up hope, he found a banker who was willing to reduce my mother's mortgage. Okay. Given all that this God of yours does not accomplish in the lives of others, given the misery that's being imposed on some helpless child at this instant, this kind of faith is obscene. Okay. To think in this way is to fail to reason honestly or to care sufficiently about the suffering of other human beings. If Jesus does come down out of the clouds like a superhero, Christianity will stand revealed as a science. That will be the science of Christianity. Every Christian will be able to say, "Told you so." I mean, here he is, look at his magic powers. This kind of analysis is like going into a church on Sundays and seeing people lined up to receive the Eucharist and asking them why they're doing this, and they tell you about the transubstantiation and their love for Jesus. And to discount all of that, we can't trust what they're saying. Actually, this is just cracker-eating behavior, and it as witnessed by the fact that it happens in other contexts. I mean, people eat crackers in other contexts, and there's a general love of crackers. And so you can't say that people are being motivated by their religion.
Well, this may be good fun.
And incidentally, if you do get an appendicitis, you might consider this idea that you've been intelligently designed. If ever there were a reductio ad absurdum of intelligent design, it's the appendix. Because if Michael or I say something derogatory about Islam or Christianity, which seems possible, the response from the other side shouldn't mention quantum mechanics. The goal is to get to a time where people's bullshit detectors are really finely calibrated, and where we, in public discourse, in journalism, at the level of newspaper editorials and every conversation that matters, we are reluctant to give people a pass when they pretend to know things they don't know. Well, as we've begun to see, one of the problems with arguing in defense of God is that the evidence in your favor is either terrible or non-existent. Many Christians imagine that the New Testament fundamentally repudiates all the barbarism that's found in the Old Testament in books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy and 2 Samuel and Exodus. That's not true. You can take Jesus in half his moods and get some really beautiful ethical precepts like the Golden Rule. But Jesus also said things like, in Luke 19, anyone who doesn't want me to reign over him, bring him before me and slay him before me. Now, the other side has been playing hide the ball with the articles of faith. Everyone should be free to believe whatever he wants about God. There's just no harm, no foul, beliefs are private. Let me tell you for a moment why I think this is a dead end. Christianity and Judaism have suffered a harrowing collision with modernity over the last 200 years. I mean, they have just had their religions mastered by science and secular politics and common sense to a degree that has not occurred in the Muslim world. Okay, is the worst possible misery for everyone really bad? Once again, we have hit philosophical bedrock with the shovel of a stupid question. It's true that you can cherry pick Scripture, and you can look for all the good parts. You can ignore where it says in Leviticus that if a woman is not a virgin on her wedding night, you're supposed to stone her to death on her father's doorstep. You know, the recent shooting at Virginia Tech, the mother of the shooter recognized that there was something wrong with her son. She took him from church to church in search of exorcism. She actually found a church that performed an exorcism. And we have a church willing to put forward its expertise in the performance of an exorcism. It would be a lot better if everyone involved had a 21st century view of mental health. In terms of religion, the mother was right. I mean, there are demons, and Jesus cast them out. You know, I mean, demonic possession is actually a problem. What we have to convince ourselves of is that love and curiosity is enough for us, and intellectual honesty is the guardian of that. They are the responses of a lunatic or an idiot. I mean, by responding in that way, I would have disqualified myself for any position of responsibility in a first world society. We should be practicing slavery. The creator of the universe clearly expects us to keep slaves. He simply tells us not to beat our slaves so severely that we put out their eyes or their teeth. Jesus clearly expected us to keep slaves. He never criticizes the institution of slavery. He uses analogies with slaves. Paul, in 1 Timothy, admonishes slaves to serve their masters well and to serve their Christian masters especially well. so that they can partake in their holiness. We should be beating our children with rods. It says in Proverbs. Incidentally, fundamentalist Christians in our country are beating their children with rods. And yet you put a few miracle stories in an ancient book, and half the people on earth think it a legitimate project to organize their lives around them. Does anyone else see a problem with that? Because the God that our neighbors believe in is essentially an invisible person. He is a creator deity who created the universe to have a relationship with one species of primate. Lucky us. and he's got galaxy upon galaxy to attend to, but he's especially concerned with what we do, and he's especially concerned with what we do while naked. Perhaps you've noticed Dr. Craig has a charming habit of summarizing his opponent's points in a way in which they were not actually given, so I will leave it to you to sort it out on YouTube. Needless to say, I didn't call those esteemed colleagues of his psychopaths, as I made clear. Let me just give a word of caution about MDMA. I haven't been shy about saying that MDMA has been useful to me personally. It was actually the first drug I took that made me realize there was a very different kind of experience a person could have in this world than the one I was tending to have. Something like 44% of the American population, if they turned on their television sets and saw that a mushroom cloud had replaced New York City, they would see a silver lining in this cloud, because it would be a portent to them. It would presage that the best thing that is ever going to happen is about to happen, the return of Christ. Now, you're all aware, of course, that the Quran exists and claims to be the perfect word of the creator of the universe. You're aware that once having heard of this possibility and rejecting it, you're all going to hell for eternity. I mean, needless to say, Dr. Craig and I are both going to hell if this vision of life is true. Intelligent design is not what they're fancying. They believe that we were created from mud with divine breath sometime in the last 6,000 years. You know, Adam and Eve standing in a garden with a talking snake and a hankering for apples. This is literally the vision of the creation of our species. I can hope that I have won the lottery. That is a representation of the world. It's a representation of a possible state of the world. But believing I have won the lottery is the only thing that actually opens the floodgates of emotion and behavior to behavior and emotion that's appropriate to actually having won the lottery. Then you go on that lunatic shopping spree and offend all of your friends. The creator of the universe literally promised the land of Israel to the Jews. This is in his capacity as an omniscient real estate broker. Well, what if Muslims are right? And what if Islam is true? Okay, how should we view God in moral terms? How would we view God in moral terms? Or I should say Allah. Okay, we have been born in the wrong place, to the wrong parents, given the wrong culture, given the wrong theology. Okay, needless to say, Dr. Craig is doomed. He's been thoroughly confused by Christianity. I mean, just appreciate what a bad position he's now in to appreciate the true Word of God. I've been thoroughly misled by science. Okay, where is Allah's compassion? Okay. And yet, He's omnipotent. He could change this in an instant. He could give us a sign that would convince everyone in this room. And yet he's not going to do it. And hell awaits. And hell awaits our children because we can't help but mislead our children. Okay, now just hold this vision in mind. And first appreciate how little sleep you have lost over this possibility. Okay? Just feel in yourself at this moment how carefree you are and will continue to be in the face of this possibility. What are the chances that we're all going to go to hell for eternity because we haven't recognized the Quran to be the perfect word of the creator of the universe? Please know that this is exactly how Christianity appears to someone who's not been indoctrinated by it. The end game for civilization is not mere tolerance of other people's irrationality. It is not political correctness. It is reason. Thank you very much. Thank you.